stay down. Final warning.
Final warning, this is the first time you say. Welcome back, YouTube. This is GBE, and we're continuing Countdown to Infinity War. Today we're talking one of my favorite movies in the entire MCU, the first movie in Phase 3, and that is Captain America Civil War. As always, there will be spoilers. With that out of the way, let's jump right into the discussion. Captain America Civil War is the third movie in the Captain America franchise. This movie takes place sometime after the events of Age of Ultron. If you remember, that final shot in Age of Ultron is a new set of Avengers who are going to be trained by Captain America and the Black Widow. So this new team is set on a mission to catch Crossbones, and the mission goes terribly wrong. Civilians end up getting hurt, and that brings about the Sokovia Accords, which means that if the Avengers want to intervene in any type of crisis or event, it has to be sanctioned by the United Nations and a sanctioning panel. Some of the Avengers are for it, some of the Avengers are not, and you know that Captain America is against it, Iron Man's for it, and that leads us into Civil War and all the actions that come after that. As far as the plot goes, I think it does a really good job at slowing down at times, but really keeping up the pace at the same time, if that makes any sense. There isn't really a slow moment. Even the smaller moments between few characters I really enjoy, and I think overall this movie does a good job in putting a really well told story together. Off the top, I have to mention Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa. There's something that's this quiet rage simmering underneath the surface, and after the death of his father, he just becomes filled with vengeance, and you could see it even though he's controlled. Like under the surface, you know that there's this rage, there's this thirst for vengeance that really is waiting to get out. And even though we only get one scene with him and his father, you can tell that there's a great amount of love and respect and admiration from him to his father, and his father is truly proud of the man that he's becoming, and that it comes across really well in that small sequence that we got to see them together. Secondly, I want to mention Tom Holland. As soon as we see that title card about Queens, you know what's coming, and Tom Holland steals the cake in the small scenes that he's in as Peter Parker. Like off the bat, you're like, yes, this is my Peter Parker. This guy seems like he's in high school. This guy seems like he's really 15 years old and he's dealing with everyday teenager problems, but at the same time, he's trying to do the right thing because he has these abilities. And he knows that if he doesn't act, some of the bad things that happen could be because he chose not to. And to carry that around as a 15-year-old is really powerful, and he really puts that forward in his performances. So I have to really mention him at the top of the list. And as always, Captain America, Chris Evans, is fantastic. Like, he really puts emotion and tension in this film, especially when he shares the screen with Tony, played by Robert Downey Jr. And Tony, Iron Man, once again, he's being driven by fear, he's being driven by guilt, and that's why he decides to sign the Accords. And that's what really brings the tension between the team, because he's almost blinded by his guilt and his fear and all the things that the Avengers have caused. He really carries that on his shoulders, and that really comes across when he has his one-on-one conversations with Captain America. This is an Avengers movie. Actually, let me say that off the top. I hate, and it bothers me that people call this Avengers 2.5, because I feel that it's really a Captain America movie. The action and the story is really driven by his choices that he makes, and that comes across in the first action sequence where he gets distracted with the mention of Bucky. Crossbones really gets him off his game, and that's where everything comes from and developing the rest of the story, because he was distracted by the name of his long lost friend who turned Hydra agent. Some of the other sequences, one of my favorite is the apartment where they find the Winter Soldier and Captain America and Falcon are there, and then they get breached and attacked by the GSG-9. I love that whole sequence where they're fighting inside the apartment, and then when they're fighting down the stairwell, and then when out of nowhere comes T'Challa, and we see him for the first time as Black Panther, and he has this great chase scene with the Winter Soldier and Captain America following behind. That is also awesome. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fantastic, awesome airport sequence where we get to really experience everybody's abilities. There's really a small showcase for every hero on screen to show their abilities and what they're able to do. And this is the first time we see a Spider-Man, a Tom Holland, wisecracking and swinging through and webbing up people. And that was pretty awesome to see. But I think that everyone in this action sequence got a moment to shine, and that's pretty awesome. But for me, the best action sequence has to be the final battle between Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Iron Man. Because right before the action hits, there's a moment where Iron Man realizes that he's made a mistake, that maybe Bucky isn't behind the bombings and the terrorist acts. And he comes to the aid of Captain America because he thinks that there's other Winter Soldiers, as we found out earlier in the film, and there's going to be this big fight sequence and Cap needs his help. And they have this moment where they connect with each other and it's like, yes, things are going to be all right. And they give you that little sequence right before everything goes down the drains, and they have this big intense battle because we find out that Captain America knew all along that Tony's parents were murdered, and he tried to keep that from himself because, as he said, he was really trying to just guard himself and not Tony, because he was trying to, I guess, avoid this confrontation. But that whole sequence works because we see the camaraderie, I butchered that, between these two characters right before they go to blows. And that final sequence when Cap breaks Tony's arc reactor and he's 1 inch away from killing Tony, and Tony has this horrified look in his face, and Captain's like, what am I doing? It's fantastic, and it's everything I wanted. Even though it's not this huge fight sequence between hundreds of heroes like it was in the graphic novel, it still works for me because it's more intense and it's more personal. I gotta say, the best thing that I like about this movie, that at times it was really small and personal, and that really came across in a couple of scenes between Tony and Captain America, where they're really discussing their differences and why they've come to this moment. That really works for me. Like I said in the previous clip, that final battle sequence, it's so personal. It's filled with so much dread, with so much suspense, because you know that deep down these guys really had admiration for one another. But Tony really, you can't blame him for losing his mind. He knows deep down that Bucky wasn't in his right mind when he murdered his parents and he was brain controlled. But when you see it for the first time, when all these years you thought it was by an accident, and you get to witness it firsthand, and the guy who murdered your parents is in front of you, tell me, how would you react? So I really like that. There are 2 downsides. One is kind of a nitpick. When the Winter Soldier gets captured and Zemo gets called, pretends to be the psychologist. Like, how did he know that they were going to take him to that facility? How did he know they were going to call the doctor that they ended up calling? That's a bit of a plot hole in my opinion. And the other thing that I really dislike, and it just bugs me, is the final letter that Captain America writes to Iron Man. It's like, I know I messed up. Sorry, I kept the truth about your parents. I almost beat you to death. But I'm really sorry about that now. And if you need me later, hey, you can call me. We're good. No, you do not get to just brush it under the table and be like, oh, we're good now. No, I hope that the Russo brothers address that in Infinity War, and there's maybe another confrontation, and they have to come together because of the threat. Because otherwise that just cheapens everything that came before it. And no, I'm not about that noise. Alright guys, that's my thoughts on Captain America Civil War, the first movie in Phase 3. Hope you enjoyed that, and stick around because we got a lot of videos coming up. I think at this point we have already dropped our Quiet Place spoiler-free review, but we also got a vlog that Eric did during spring break. That should be dropping pretty soon. Also, we got our Infinity War spoiler-free and spoiler review coming up. And next week we are doing Rampage as well. So stick around for all that. Make sure you hit that bell so you get alerted every time we drop a video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. For now, this is GBE saying